Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me.
You are now tuned in to your Inner Voyager experience. Welcome to the unknown, the unknown, the unknown, the unknown, the unknown.
Welcome to the Inner Voyager. This is one of your hosts, Todd Social, and I'm here with the ultimate Inner Voyager himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Captain Matthew Schwab. And today, Matthew, why don't you let the audience know what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, what's up, man? We're gonna be talking about the future of work. What does the future of work look like from an end user perspective, all the way up to a cultural perspective, and how that affects productivity and success ultimately.
Okay. So, what does that look like? Because, there's a lot to be said right now with what's going on, the shift that's actually happening. We've seen how the Olympics has shifted because of it. We're seeing how sports is shifting because of it. Obviously, business decisions are being influenced by it. Corporate is asking a lot of questions. We've heard the terms of workplace wellness, thrown around. Obviously, there's some companies that are ahead of the curve that are kind of working on it, but we also know about those companies that are way behind the curve that are still kind of sitting still. So, kind of what is your overall thoughts about that, about the changing landscape?
Well, we were talking about this morning in Clubhouse, and I think there's a perspective shift that's happened in that people are so focused on the divisiveness that started with COVID last year, and then that rolled out into, well, Black Lives Matter came out before that, but so it was Black Lives Matter, COVID, the height of Black Lives Matter with the marches and the protests that were going on, and then the explosion of uh, diversity, inclusion, and we had gender issues, gender topics, social injustices. So there was all these divisivenesses that happened, and they had a severe impact on what people's focus is. And I think culture is really getting lost in terms of that, because everybody's voice is screaming so loud that it's all creating static, that we're really missing the signals of the coherence and the productivity and the ultimate unity that we have in terms of productivity and work.
Yep. And the thing is that this shift was kind of the narrative, as people like to say, or changing the narrative was occurring, but it was in like small, bite size deals. But now it feels like it's a big wave, in a lot of cases, because now people are doing the basic thing, which is acknowledging things, which is interesting because now the conversations that we have, and I know the conversations I've been having in different communities has changed because a lot of people don't realize acknowledgement was the biggest issue, more than the action. People can litigate the past. They can litigate civil rights. They can litigate, the Black Panther movement, all that stuff. They can litigate, slavery. But one thing that cannot be litigated was acknowledgement, because when you start acknowledgement and you start to go from a place of acceptance, then you can actually be able to start to do the process of healing to be able to actually move forward. And I think that's what's happening now is you have corporate greed, which has been essentially, denied by this newer generation, by them saying it will be a standard for me to work for you if you have these things, or else I won't. And I think the corporate greed is realizing we can't keep manufacturing, our way of being as a way to manipulate people that actually work for us. We actually have to shift. So you're seeing some people are having the diversity question, other people are having diversity officers. And more importantly, I feel like the choice of diversity shouldn't necessarily be, a black person as much as should be a person who has robust knowledge of different types of cultures that understands how to connect, because that's kind of like a soft pitch to say, okay, see, I told you so. I used to have this conversation with my friends, like, people that would talk in circles about the former President Obama, like he's not a legitimate president. Why? Because he's black. See, I told you so. He went to Harvard. He got a law degree. Why is he not qualified? Oh, he's a community organizer. Okay, something's wrong with that. He's organizing communities, and a large one at that, in a metro city. So it's just one of those things where it's like the levels of success were predetermined by your belief of entitlement. So if you were already entitled because it was an ancestry entitlement, it wasn't even like an earned entitlement. This is why we had our previous president, because his family earned entitlement. And so by product of that, or by proxy of that, he received entitlement in a lot of ways. Would Donald Trump be as successful as he would have been had he had to start from scratch? There's questions there. But on the same right, you have people who scratch and claw and grow and get to a certain point, and they don't look back either. And a lot of it is about that looking back, because to me, essentially, the future of work is embedded in empathy and passion and purpose. We discover those things at a young age.
Yep.
It's not something that just we get as we get older. We actually discover at a young age, but we have no way to act on it. And this is where companies have to get it right. If you empower somebody at 21 or 20 or 22, whatever the age is, they graduate and go to get their master's or whatever the case may be, if you empower them, you will have generational growth. If you take away their power and suppress them and manipulate them, essentially your growth as a company will be slower, because those people will grow past you. And we've now seen that, outside of COVID, is that people are not going back to work. There's a ridiculous number that's out right now where I think it's like 72% of people would not like to go back to work or work in the workplace they want to work in, because they're considering their health as their biggest priority. So in thinking about that, or talking about that, what do you think are some of the key takeaways that if an organization was talking to us today, or they were listening to us, what do you think some of the key takeaways that they can actually get from, the Great Resignation? What can they learn from that, and how can they actually grow and reframe their companies? What do you think, Matt?
I think just the mere fact that they're willing to understand and to listen to the people that they work for, and not the other way around, empowering that level of employee from the bottom up. I was always taught that you treat the janitor the same way as you treat the CEO, period, or captain in my case, having come up in the merchant marine world, which is completely different than the corporate world. So it was always you treat another man or woman or transgender, and I've had experiences with that, as an equal, and that's it, period, end of story. And then the mission of getting the cargo from A to B becomes much easier. So I think if we take that concept of, yes, there was soft skills that we had to know in the merchant marine, but if we take that concept of you treat another person as an equal and be willing to see, hear, and understand them, because that's really all people want to do. They want to feel safe, they want to be part of something greater than themselves, they want to have belief, and they want to have purpose in their job. And that purpose means being seen, heard, and understood no matter what's going on. How do we do that? Well, I think that leadership needs to come down to the level of what their employees are, to connect with them more deeply, because how a company is starts at the top. How a ship is run starts at the top. If a captain treats people with disrespect, then the entire crew, the entire culture of the crew is going to mimic that disrespect. Whatever that person is dealing with at the top in their personal life, chances are that it's bleeding over into their professional life. And that's what they have to confront first. And that is the greatest opportunity that COVID gave us, because it gave us time to get still and allow all the darkness to come up and shed light on it and see what really needs to be healed. And you can look back. You talked about President Trump and President Obama. That was the perfect stage for this polarization that's now happening, because it was like you had the suave black president who stood for community and democracy, and then you had the complete opposite of it, and that swung society so hard, so fast. Well, if you take Bush on the back end of Bush, Obama, and then Trump, man, that swung society so hard, and it's actually a really beautiful thing if you think about it, because it's all of these things that we need to really take a look and understand, but we have to move past them. And that's the problem, is we're not, people don't want to move past it. They're either stuck in the way before it was, that they're holding on to that so hard in the past, or they're bucking at diversity and inclusion, and they can't get over that. And all it takes is really just diving in and taking an honest look at yourself and seeing where that experience in your life mimics something that you're holding on to from your personal life. Period.
Well, and so the culture shift that should be happening is not necessarily happening as fast as it should or as swift as it should, because you still have legacy beliefs that are the chains of each working environment. Like I was having a conversation with my friends, and we were talking about, why is the grocery store still have an ethnic aisle? I mean, at this point, like what's the real reason why? Like we like, if we're really in this age of culture and we're really in this age of acknowledgement, why does the ethnic aisle still have to play a role in society when it's just food, and food should be a choice? And even if you're one of those people who spends time in the ethnic aisle, why are beans, it doesn't matter the packaging. Why does Goya have to be in the ethnic aisle as opposed to being in the aisle with the beans? And so it's like that still legacy mindset where it's like, okay, we'll give you the flares. We'll put some flowers in the front. We'll let you, a lot of grocery stores now have access to alcohol and wine. So we'll give you some wine. We'll cheer you up. We'll give you a little showcase place, to cafe to hang out, but you still have your ethnic aisle. And it feels like in working culture, it's still that, where it's like, okay, we'll give you a diversity and inclusion officer, or we'll create a diversity and inclusion program. But will we actually hire different? Will we promote different? Will we actually seek out community, charities or community events that we can actually participate in? Will we encourage our current staff to be charitable and giving and do give backs and pay it forwards and things like that? Will we do a pay it forward for the people that do exist? Will we incentivize them by simply being kind? Where is that at? So if we're really into that culture shift, it's not giving me the branding of diversity that a lot of companies are still kind of siloed in. It's like, give me the action, show me the intent, because we can actually show you results. If we came out and did a training, and did mind work, with your people to work on productivity and sensitivity, all those things. And that's another thing. Why sensitivity if you don't understand wellness as a total, composite to keep you from productivity? It's just serious. Go ahead.
What you said, because we're stuck at emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the ethnic food aisle, it's like it's the trigger, it's the burden of the emotional trigger, who that's getting put on.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to the willingness to get uncomfortable in order to overcome the boundary. The
Mm-hmm.
conversation doesn't want to be had about the ethnic aisle, because that would insinuate that there is segregation or some disparity in culture.
Yep.
And nobody wants to have that conversation in the food aisle, because it's so in the grocery store, because the grocery store is already fueled by emotional attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And then blowing that out to the macro in the culture of corporations. First of all, men don't think that they should feel emotion, let
Mm-hmm.
alone be able to get on the level and have the empathy to be able to understand somebody truly, of what they're coming from, where they're coming from, of what
Yep.
racism feels like,
Yep.
of what sexism feels like.
Yep.
So I think once there's the courage and the vulnerability of leaders to be able to say, you know what,
Yep.
I'm willing to go down that road with you,
Yep.
because what's going to be on the back end of that, that growth is going to be so much greater, and it's not going to be based on greed. It's going to be based on coherence and
Yep.
unity
Yep.
and true productivity.
Yep.
But it takes those people to get out of their own way to understand themselves at a deeper level. And it's
Hmm.
starting to happen because everybody's at their own level, right? Like we talk about mental health. The
Yep.
conversation shouldn't be about mental health. We should be talking about mental wellness.
Yep.
But an athlete, Simone Biles, we talked about this in Clubhouse too. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
About Simone Biles, how she completely changed the game of Olympic gymnastics,
Hmm.
because of everything that she's been through. It's not in the dark anymore of what happened to those poor young women. They were just an identity that fuels a machine. And now all of those veils are being removed, and people are like, "Oh my God, the world's ending." No, it's not. It's just going to a deeper understanding of ourselves so we can get to a better place, because we've been pushing all this stuff down since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The school system is still even based on that, the rows and columns of chairs. Well, I mean, they're going towards more of the creative model, and that's why we're doing the work and the future of work that we're doing, because we understand that shift from the competitive to the collaborative mindset. So we should be having conversations about what can we do to improve our mental wellness, our mental well-being, instead of taking it from a hierarchical standpoint of mental health. And there's levels to that too. There are people that need mental health support, but the conversation should be talking about how can we get everybody to be mentally well, to have well-beingness in their life, from impoverished neighborhoods to vets to corporate environments to the military. It should be all the same.
Because wellness is not a standard, sickness is. Sickness is a standard of society to say, okay, you are less than, and we're greater because I'm not sick. So people don't acknowledge what's actually going on inside of them. So a lot of times people go to work sick, they don't call off, they don't take time to themselves, they don't take breaks. I remember talking to my mom a long time ago when she was not retired, when she was still working. And it was probably, I think, the last couple years of her job. And essentially she had accumulated so much time, never taking off, never taking a vacation, that she could legitly work like only like 3.5 days a week, because she was conditioned to never take off, to never call in sick or anything else, even when she was. I remember countless amount of times that she was in between jobs, sick. And this society, perpetuated that, because if you wanted to get ahead, you had to work hard. It's not work efficient, work smart, work hard. And so essentially people will work themselves to the bone, and then that would actually be a trigger or a series of events that could happen in one household, especially if someone's overworked because they're overwhelmed. So that could bring out, certain types of anger, and a different temperature and a different narrative in the family household. Just that little touch point. But now it's like people are starting to realize, what's the point? You want me to do all this work, but essentially, what does it actually add up to? When in fact, it only really directly benefits a small amount of society, not the mass amount of society. So, in order to create a well society, we have to shift that narrative and say, even the janitor has to be well or happy. He has to be the happiest janitor on the face of the planet for us to have a happy organization. If we do not have that, then we have not done our job. The corporate profits shouldn't be based off of, chasing, goals and things like that. It should be on values, value added happiness amongst your staff that contribute towards those corporate goals would get you to the same point. But essentially, that's not the narrative, because then you'd have to break down the walls of the 40-hour work week and how that actually works out. You'd have to break down the walls of going to work and going through the commute and going through the stress and strain of getting yourself prepared for the next day and the next week. But are we ready to define the culture of the future of work? I believe that we are, but how do we start that? And I know that you have a lot of insight on that, Matt. So how about you talk about about that in particular. How do we define the culture of the future of work?
Well, the future of yeah, the culture for the future of work needs to be, first of all, accepted where we're at. Accept the situation where we're at. Accept the fact that we've been subconsciously programmed to be greedy, because that's really not who we are. That's a nurtured behavior throughout generations. And once there is acceptance, and acceptance takes authenticity, dare I say, vulnerability to admit. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that takes a lot of courage to do that, because myself, I've had a long journey in terms of emotional intelligence and knowing thyself, to the point where you have to understand why you get angry, because anger covers up a root cause of an emotion that we're not ready to deal with. It's a protective mechanism. So if we're operating from that standpoint, then it's going to be fight or flight no matter what we're doing. And we need to accept that we've been in survival mode for generations now. I mean, our parents well, we're two generations removed from the Great Depression here in America. And what were they concerned with? Getting enough money to put bread on the table. I just baked a loaf of sourdough bread in the middle of doing all the meetings today, and that's a pleasure. A century ago, that wasn't that wasn't a luxury. We didn't have that option. So it's really it's really nobody's fault. We just need to acknowledge it and accept it, and be able to talk about it openly in order to shift that narrative. It really just comes down to communication, and not vertical communication, but also horizontal communication, lateral communication within our organizations, that helps to level the playing field. And once it's all out in the open, and it really doesn't take very long, I mean, you could shift this in a couple hours. And once that's done, now it's like, oh man, it feels like there's more space in here. Like we can really get some work done. Now, you take the office setting, being thrown back and forth between remote work and at office work, with the different variant strains coming out of COVID. Now you've put a much more of a complex problem on top of it, because all these people that were shrouded in this tradition of just, this is the way we do business, this is the way it's always been, they're just waiting to pull people back into the office. But guess what? This is the new normal. This isn't going to change. In fact, the people that are still stuck are going to keep digging their boots in, and it's going to get harder and harder and harder. And profits are going to suffer and suffer and suffer, until we've put in our egos and our pride out of the way and said, you know what? Maybe I need a little help. Maybe I need a little help. Maybe I need to understand a little bit more about myself in order to move forward, in order to grow. So it's really a growth conversation. It's how do you shift all of this change to happening for you, or to happening for you, instead of being a victim of it and it happening to you.
Well, it's the psychology though is, you know, next man up or next woman up. And so I think what's happening also in the employee environment is people are saying openly, why does it have to be a next man or a next woman? Why does, when you look at the concept of employment versus unemployment, a lot of this is, especially in this cycle, in times right now, a lot of it is rooted in the fact that this has been a time for those who have been kind of maybe sharp in how they manage their margins better. Especially when you have a lot of people in the service industry, which makes zero sense because they're working on tips anyway. The service industry is taking a major hit, and now people are kind of reframing their businesses, but you're now starting to find out that that is a culturally embedded kind of mindset where it's like, okay, it's about me. And so there's been a lot of complaints, from businesses, but they don't understand that when you shift a person culturally from what they're used to, I talked to a lady one day, 20 years, working as a waitress. She didn't know anything else. So now we're asking her to go back and retrain herself, reframe her life and everything else. But she was used to her routine. But yet you award people who maybe were temporary into their routine, maybe started businesses. And I'm kind of conflicted because I always want to support business owners, but at the same time, if it's supporting a business owner at the mindset of hurting someone else, then you need to shift your culture towards that. Yes, everybody had to go kind of under the hood and figure out what that was or how that was going to be. But culture should have been at the foundation regardless. So what was the foundation like? A lot of it was probably scary. So then people are dealing with their scary truth where you have to now manage your margin. So this is about creating the new narrative of culture. And so essentially in creating that new narrative, Matt, how do you think businesses that are generationally old, because obviously new businesses are probably going to be a little bit more warm to it because they're living it or they just started inside of it. But what about those generational businesses? How can they create a new narrative of culture into their business so they can actually bolster their organization and make it a strong suit versus an ongoing weakness for them?
I have to come back. I have to come back to acceptance. Dealing, that's the baby boomer generation, the tail end of the baby boomer generation, and being able to, just a willingness to understand a little more deeply, and connecting more with the people who that individual, that leader works for, to say, hey, how you doing today? What's happening in your life? Start to take down some of the barriers, because it's a journey. Like, it takes a long time to heal all of that. And it's got nothing to do with those employees. It's got everything to do with the leadership of the organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So starting small, I mean, I think about how I talk to people in that generation, and the lexicon that we use. It comes down to, dare I say, like, something as small as, hey, does your closet at home mimic your desk in the office? Because how that mind is organized, they're so embedded in just money and profits that you really have to start small. So I would just say better communication and outreach from that leader to the organization to try and connect with them on an individual level. My fiance has an awesome team that she works with, and every meeting, like, we both work from home. We're blessed with that, and they have meetings every week, and they start them off with a personal and professional win. So in your Zoom meetings, ask somebody how they're doing personally. Start the tone of the meeting off with getting the temperature of everybody with how they're doing personally. Because if that person is showing up 70% and they have something else on their mind because of the cacophony of events that are going on in their life, then the leader of that organization, knowing that that person is at 70% and maybe help lifting them up to 90 or even 100%, it's going to work. It's going to speak volumes for the company and the culture, because that leader went above and beyond to say, you know what? I acknowledge the fact that things are hard right now. It's not about just driving the bottom dollar. It's
Yep.
about knowing who my people are, what affects them, what triggers them, and then
Mhm.
how do I help them overcome those triggers? Because overcoming those triggers are going to create greater productivity and greater success.
Hmm. Hmm. So after all this and through our discussion, we have now discovered that acceptance is a big principle that you have to be able to utilize. So at the end of the day, start with the thing that is easiest to start with, which is accept. Accept, the standpoint that you're in. So this is for those legacy businesses and legacy mindsets. Yes, the world has shifted. We no longer need ethnic grocery aisle. You can actually make our groceries the same. We no longer need segregated areas or even a lot of these legacy, say from country clubs to lodges. Accept that there is a society that will support your initiatives as long as you support society. And supporting society is actually supporting humanity. So from the Inner Voyager, make sure that if you ever want to actually change your culture, you can reach out and touch us, whether it's Matthew Swab or Todd Social. You can always connect because we're always willing to collaborate. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can check us out weekly when we're on Clubhouse. You can check out our LinkedIn lives, or you can just simply message Matt on LinkedIn, say, I'm ready to accept the change so we can help you change your culture from productivity to mindset to simple principles of empathy and passion and building culture. We're here to serve you, and we want you to grow and scale based upon real purpose and real self-love and real self-care. So from the Inner Voyager to you, any last words, Matt, before we go?
You take the example of who hosts this show. Sometimes you do, sometimes I do. We flow back and forth like that, and that creates such agility and such adaptability, and that inherently makes you resilient. So, yeah, it's the little things.
Acceptance and resilience. From us at the Inner Voyager to you. Check us out weekly when we talk about the future of work. Look for us online. Subscribe, like, share, follow, join it at theinnervoyager.com if you want to become a part of your new adventure, your new journey, your new voyage. And look for us to be there for you because we're here to help you change your culture.
Culture as a service. Take care, everybody.
Welcome aboard your voyage. We'll be departing shortly.
Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me.
You are now tuned in to your Inner Voyager experience. Welcome to the unknown, the unknown, the unknown, the unknown.